It's baffled scholars for 2 millennia. It is a puzzle made of multi-dimensional elements, an enigma with roots that reach back to the dawning of time, perhaps before. Daniel explained part of it. Ezekiel and Isaiah had glimpses into it. John saw it all for the time of the end. That time is now. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert on a journey that spans the course of history, from Eden to Mount Hermon, from Hermon to Babel, from Babel to Rome, from Rome to the cross, and from there to us. Biblical prophecy is coming true before your eyes, and to understand it, you must discern the times both then and now. It's time to unravel the threads of this all-encompassing prophetic paradox. It's time to unravel Revelation. Welcome to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert, back for another week with our friend and author, Dr. Douglas Hamp, as we continue discussing his book, Corrupting the Image 3, Singularity, Superhumans, and the Second Coming of Jesus. And as we mentioned last week, Doug, who is the pastor of the Way Congregation in Denver, has some very interesting views and views that actually track with what Sharon and I think about the end times, which is why we not only do this program every week, but Sci Friday every week. So we do understand, and we're very open to this idea of what some might consider a science fiction interpretation of end times prophecy, but we think there's a lot of explanatory power there. So back to pick up the conversation where we left off last week, because there are a lot of questions hanging in the air, is Dr. Douglas Hamp. Doug, thanks for coming back this week.
Thanks for having me again. I really appreciate it. It's great to be here.
There are so many questions about end times prophecy out there, and as we discussed off air here, this is such an exciting thing to study, not because it's weird or different and gives us the opportunity to be sensational or try to sell books based on, these odd topics, but because this is the promise of the return of our Creator who spoke the universe into existence. Why wouldn't we want to learn everything we possibly could about this? And certainly the enemy that we face, the principalities and powers, are much older and smarter than we are, and they're going to use every trick at their disposal, every conceivable deception to lure us away from the promise and the blessed hope that we have, the blessed assurance that we have. But some of the questions that Christian theologians have been trying to figure out for 2,000 years now, the identities, for example, of the Antichrist, of course, but the subject that we discussed last week, the main theme, the activity of the two witnesses. Let's start there, and then I want to move on to 2 Thessalonians again and the Restrainer. But the two witnesses, who do you see is as the two witnesses, and why?
So I actually think that they're going to be Moses and Elijah. I think, those are the two guys that showed up with Jesus on Mount Hermon, right?
Right.
They're going to predicted to come back. Certainly Elijah is predicted to come back, and before the coming of the great day of the Lord. And as far as the rabbis were concerned, they believed that Moses would be the guy that would come with Elijah. I think their opinion matters. In my opinion, I think it makes a lot of sense. Also, it talks about the two olive trees who stand before the Lord. Who are the ones that were standing before the Lord? Well, Moses very clearly was standing before the Lord, and then Elijah as I who stand before the Lord, right? So you have those that language right there, and they're known as when it says the two anointed. The word is not anointed, like it's not the word Mashiach, right? That's what we typically think of, but it's the word zahar, which is to from oil, okay? But oil can burn, right? So it has sort of this other meaning of someone who is kind of bright or who's lit up. And guess what? When they showed up on Mount Hermon, or the Transfiguration, they were shining, right? And if it's not these guys, I think it's two guys who come in the spirit of Moses and Elijah. So, I get, maybe it could be John and Bob, I don't know, but I really think it's going to be Moses and Elijah. That's my opinion on that.
Well, actually, we track on that, and we agree, and we find that the other interesting correlation between Moses and Elijah is that both of them left this world at the same place at the south end of the Jordan River. Both of them appeared with Jesus on Mount Hermon at the north end, but Elijah was caught up after crossing over the Jordan from Jericho, and Moses was buried on the plains of Moab right there
Wow.
across from Jericho. So there
That's
seems to be
cool.
a connection there along
Yes.
that Jordan Rift Valley.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, that's really cool. That's a great point. I tell you, there's always more to discover when you're looking at this stuff,
Well, there
And
truly
I
is.
appreciate that you said something about, kind of a science fiction interpretation. But I think when we start putting it into our modern day context, it's going to sound kind of sci-fi. It's not going to be felt boards, right? It's not going to be, um, it's not going to be Jesus meek and mild who comes back, but this is going to be an epic event that is totally big screen worthy. Okay, it's going to be as sci-fi as you can possibly get, in the coolest sense of the word,
Mhm.
sci-fi. When the Lord returns, now it's going to be terrible judgment as well. But again, we just had to put this in a context, and so I think when the world sees the two witnesses, they're not gonna say, oh, those are the two witnesses from the Bible, and gee, I think they're going to say these are aliens because we don't believe in that God dude from the Bible. He's just a fairy tale. But clearly, these are beings that we can't explain. We can't get rid of them, and we need to find a way to somehow get rid of them, right? And if we've all evolved this far, right, that's what people absolutely believe. Um, if we evolve, then they're probably just evolved advanced beings.
Mhm.
And maybe they do work for the God of the Bible, but we know that he's just an advanced, evolved being as well, right? And if he's evolved, then we can evolve too, right? We just got to catch up a little bit, right? And that's what I think part of what's going to happen when Satan makes his covenant with death and Sheol with the world is this is going to be not only an opportunity to get rid of these two guys, but then an opportunity for everybody to upgrade as well. We'll get to that in a second because that's kind of fun. But I know you wanted to go back to
Well,
Second
yeah, I
Thessalonians.
want because Second Thessalonians 2, you've got the man of lawlessness or the man of sin is revealed, the son of destruction, son of perdition, depending on your translation, who is allowed to step in when only he who now restrains it. The mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains it will do so until he is out of the way. So, who is that character? Who is the restrainer?
So my opinion has morphed a little bit as I've continued to study this, and I respect people that see it other ways. Okay, so what I would suggest though is that um, the whole thing of the falling away, that word there, apostasia. Apostasia is an abstract noun, but there's also something called an apostasion. An apostasion is actually a certificate, a piece of paper, or some kind of a document on which the occurrence of the apostasia is recorded,
Hmm.
right? So the apostasion typically was a divorce decree, okay? And then the divorce being an abstract noun, that's the thing that happens, but it's the apostasion that's recording it, okay? So that gives us a little bit of insight as to what this falling away is going on. It's not just that people, used to love vanilla, now they love chocolate, right? It's not something like that. But there's some kind of an agreement, a contract that people have been in that has now been breached. And what I would suggest is if we go to Daniel chapter 12, I think this is where we have the answer. Because it says, at that time, Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation. Now, it's like, wait, let's back up here. So Michael is going to stand up. He's the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. Okay, so Michael's on the job, right? It sounds like
Mm-hmm.
he's on the job. And then he's going to stand up. And the word stand up is the word amad in Hebrew, and it's a military, there's a military usage of that word. For example, in the book of Esther, the Jews were allowed to stand up and to defend themselves. All right. And so that seems to be the usage here. But what got me, I'm like, okay, so he's the great prince. He's the one who's standing watch militarily. He's watching over Israel. But then there's going to be this time of trouble, and it's going to be like no other time. And it's like, well, is he on the job or isn't he on the job? And what I would suggest is yes, okay, he's on the job until he's not. He's on the job until he's taken out of the way. And what would happen there if we then combine it with Isaiah chapter 28? Woe to you, scornful men who rule this people who are in Jerusalem, who say we've made a covenant with death. All right. Why would they make a covenant with death? Because this is going to help them overcome the overflowing scourge. They're going to get out of something, get out of that tight spot by signing onto this covenant with death. And the covenant with death is going to replace the guy who's been standing watch over them, right? And then I would also put together Revelation chapter 12. I think that is where we now see it happening in the spiritual realm. You have this battle that ensues. But wait, there's more, okay, as the commercial would tell us. All right. So in Daniel chapter 8, we have this little horn. Now, in Corrupting the Image, volume 1, I make the case, and I've made the case in all of my books, in fact, that the Antichrist, this person who really hates God, is going to become a hybrid. Okay, he's going to somehow go from being simple human to then being a god. All right, and I think in this passage we have that. It says in Daniel 8:10, and it grew up to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily sacrifice. So what I would suggest is that Satan is going to, find this guy who hates God and wants to be a god and all this stuff. He's going to then merge with him so that he becomes the beast. He becomes this superhuman entity. He then rises up, right? So now the beast is going to rise up to, when I say the beast, I really mean the beast and Satan. They're really occupying kind of the same thing, right? And if you've seen the movie Avatar, you know that the human guy was actually in the body of the alien thing, right? So when you're talking about one, you're talking about both. That's what I would suggest. So he's going to then rise up to Michael. Michael's going to stand up. He's going to defend. And Michael wins in a sense, right? He's able to overcome Satan and to keep him from going into all of the heavenly realm. And he's cast to the earth. But it's not going to be a picnic for planet Earth either, right? It's going to be really ugly, right? So he loses access to the spiritual domain, but then he has free reign down here on planet Earth.
So correlation between Daniel 12 and Revelation 12.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so then getting back to 2 Thessalonians, he's taken out of the way, the one who is restraining, right? It doesn't mean that there's no sin on planet Earth, but he has been protecting Israel as a whole, right? I mean, I know I know that the Holocaust happened. It was not a pretty sight, but still, Michael has been standing watch in general over God's people. Okay, and so what's going to happen though is he's going to be demoted or removed from that position, and when he's removed from that position, now there's a new guy who's standing watch over the people, which is the Antichrist or the beast, Satan, and it's the covenant with death and Sheol, right?
Okay.
And this is where it gets really interesting because, first of all, I just want to really preface this that we're talking about the leadership of Jerusalem. We're not talking about all Jews everywhere that they're all going to be serving the devil. I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is that the leadership, whether they're I have no idea whether their religious standing will be. Probably, I would guess they'll be atheist or agnostic, like many Israelis today. But who knows? Okay, so they are going to make this covenant because it seems like it's a great idea. So they're going to do that, and then they're going to find themselves in a bind because they're like, "Uh-oh, how do we get out of this?" When you make a covenant with death, It's probably till death do us part, I would suppose, right?
Yeah.
And right, so then how do you get out of this, right? I mean, that's what's so amazing. Um, but God has a solution, and that's what I love about it. There in Daniel or Isaiah 28, so they've made this covenant, but God says, He says, "Behold, I lay in Zion a stone for a foundation, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. Whoever believes will not act hastily." Right? And he says that your covenant with death will be annulled, and your agreement with Sheol will not stand. Well, that's interesting. This is where I think that Jesus made an ultimatum to the leadership. Again, the leadership in Jerusalem. There were myriads of Jews who believed in Jesus and Yeshua as the Messiah. Okay, so we're not talking about them. We're talking about the leadership. And in Matthew 23, he challenged the leadership. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. He said to them, "You will not see me from now until you say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Right? So he wasn't talking only to those individual men, but he was talking to that body called the Sanhedrin or whatever you want to call it. He was making a challenge to that body. And so it's that body of leadership that has to make they have to say Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, right? And so the way that the covenant with death and Sheol is going to be annulled, this is what I love, is that they're going to finally examine who Yeshua is or who Jesus is, and they're going to say, I think we made a wrong turn. I think we denied the Messiah. Oh la la, right? This
Yeah.
is a real bummer when they get down to it. It's going to be a tough moment.
Well, fascinating stuff. And again, just points to the fact that the apostles and the prophets had a clearer view of the supernatural realm than we in the 21st century. If this interpretation of end times prophecy and connecting it to the idea that the Space Brothers are coming back for a sound sci-fi, it's probably because that's the way the enemy wants us to see it. We will continue our discussion with Dr. Doug Hamp, author of Corrupting the Image 3, after this. You have blessed us with your support during our first year in ministry. You literally make it possible for us to do what we do. And so as we prepare to head into a new year, we want to return the blessing to you. Through January, we've prepared a number of special offers at the Gilbert House store, and we're featuring the Red Wing Saga, Sharon's wonderful series of supernatural thrillers that teaches spiritual warfare through masterful storytelling with fascinating historical mysteries as the backdrop. Now, all 8 novels in the Red Wing Saga, a $160 value, can be yours for just $110, a savings of $50. You'll also find the Derek Gilbert collection, all 5 of my nonfiction books, a $100 value for just $70. Those are just 2 of the special offers available through January at our online store. You'll find it at gilberthouse.org/store. And as always, we thank you for your prayers and your support. Welcome back to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert. Please take advantage of our free mobile app, also our free channel for Roku and Apple TV. It's a way to get all of our video content at no charge, and of course it bypasses the gatekeepers of big tech. You can never tell what they're going to take offense to these days. You'll find a link to those apps at our main website, which is gilberthouse.org. You'll find it in the top menu bar where it says get our free app or watch us on Roku. Dr. Doug Hamp joins us. He's the author of Corrupting the Image 3, and just some really out-of-the-box thinking as far as end times prophecy, which we really appreciate. Especially, Doug, as you connect the transhumanist movement in some of your earlier writings and the scientistic worldview that we've been indoctrinated with here in modern-day America and the Western world in general. But it makes sense when you look at the way things are unfolding around us, with the transhumanist movement promising to overcome death through science, and the way this has been worked into some of the teachings of some very prominent theologians over the last 100 years or so. The Jesuit Father Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, among them, who was called the father or the inventor of the social network, for his idea that the noosphere, the sum total of all human knowledge, would become almost a sentient web around the the Earth, and that the universe would wake up. Well, that's Dr. Raymond Kurzweil has basically adopted that into the idea of the singularity, which, of course, is part of the title of your book here. Death, Thanatos, the rider on the pale horse, is the one with whom the covenant is made. But interestingly, in Revelation chapter 9, we see when the abyss is open and these things come flying out, and they're granted the power to torment humanity for 5 months with the power of the scorpions of the earth, that people will long for Thanatos, death, and he will flee from, the rider on the pale horse will flee from people who now suddenly realize that not being able to die is not such a great idea. We're now living in an age where this is no longer just the realm of really speculative science fiction, but is, in the minds of some anyway, getting close to becoming a reality.
Yeah, and so this is where it gets kind of juicy, right? So the beast, he becomes this hybrid, which is pretty wild to think about it, right? All right, he's able to overcome the two witnesses and he kills them, right? And guess
Now,
what?
this
The
is at the
world's like,
mid,
yeah, this is amazing. This is so exciting, right?
and this is the midpoint of the tribulation period, right? 3.5
Yes.
years in, the two witnesses
Yes.
are taken out of the way. Okay.
Yep. And I'd even suggest that it could be moments before or moments after. I'm not sure which, but he goes into the temple there in Jerusalem and he says, "I am God." I think he's going to be killed somehow. Maybe somebody shoots him or something, but the death doesn't stick, right? I mean, he comes back to life, and he's just even more boastful than ever. All right, so then he kills the two witnesses. Everyone's rejoicing, sending gifts to one another. Yay, this blight on planet Earth is gone, right? We don't have to worry anymore. We can go back to the way things were. They cannot cause drought and the different things that they were doing. They cannot do these things. We're saved. But 3.5 days later, they rise from the dead. Oh man, this is bad, right? This is absolutely tragic, right? We've gone from bad to worse now. And then you hear this voice that says, Aluhena, right? Come up here, right? And they're gone. Well, what are they going to do? Well, what have they been telling us for 3.5 years? That the king is coming, an army's coming with him, right? He's going to reclaim planet Earth. Okay, well, this is not good. Okay, we know that there's going to be an invasion of an alien force that we need to fight against. So how do we do this? Well, again, the beast has shown us the way. He's shown us how we can overcome these two, right? He was able to kill them. What if we all got the upgrade and then we could all fight against this army that's coming, right? And that's exactly what Revelation tells us, is that the whole world is planning and getting ready for the coming invasion, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't make it a secret. Everyone's getting ready for Jesus. Now, again, they may not see him as Jesus Christ, the one who died for our sins and all that stuff, the Sunday school version of Jesus, right? They probably don't see him as that. They just see him, from that oppressive book that hates homosexuals, and it's such a lousy book and all this different stuff. They want nothing to do with that individual, and they're going to fight tooth and nail. So if everybody can get the upgrade, well, then we stand a really good chance of fighting them. Look, think about the creator. I think back to the movie Prometheus.
Mm-hmm.
So in that movie, you have these really tall, pale-looking creators who come to planet Earth. One of them takes some potion, and he starts to disintegrate, and he falls into the rivers of the world. And millions of years later, boom, there's life, and here's humanity, right? Okay, all from that guy and his amazing sacrifice. So fast forward into the future even more, and we decide to go and meet our creators. And when we get there, we get to the creator's home planet. It turns out the creators are a bunch of jerks. We don't like them, and we actually want nothing to do with these guys. But what's the moral of the story? They are just advanced beings that have evolved to where they are, and we've evolved this far. So what if we all just evolved a lot faster? What if we could jumpstart our evolution, and we took in this DNA upgrade? Let's call it the mark of the beast, shall we?
Yes.
And we all took it, and then we all become gods. And what I think is going to happen either here or on the back of your hand, I think that will be sort of a byproduct of taking it. right? So when everybody got the smallpox vaccine, people got this little thing on the side of their arm, right? But nobody got the vaccine so that they could have the scar. The scar became as a result of getting smallpox vaccine, right? So, which people thought was a good idea, regardless of people's views on vaccines, it seemed like a great idea. And so that was a byproduct of getting the vaccine. I would suggest that the little mark that comes up is just a byproduct. So now this is also interesting though, because now you have this little byproduct that comes up. And because we know what China is doing with their social credit system, and they have over 300 million cameras in the country, they're watching you, trust me, right? And they can see when you jaywalk, they can see when you go and visit your mother who's in the hospital, they can see what you're doing online, they can see you physically or virtually, they can see you, right? So, and there are consequences to not towing the line properly. So now they just have to put in a little bit of code, and if they don't see that mark on the forehead or on the hand, well, then they know that you haven't gotten the upgrade. And I would suspect that they're going to give everybody a time to choose the carrot instead of the club, right? Listen, why don't you should take this. Everybody needs to do this. This is for the good of humanity, and here's the incentive to do it. All right, and a lot of people are going to do it, but some people will not. And so then we have to then make it more. We have to increase the pain if you're not going to do it. So then you cannot buy or sell. And if the cameras don't see that little mark on you, then you cannot buy or sell. That's exactly what can happen with the Chinese social credit system. If your score goes down too low, they can stop you from getting on a high-speed train. They can stop you from traveling by air. They can stop you from visiting a museum or whatever it may be, right? So they can do that based on your credit score.
With the development of the central bank digital currencies, which are now underway and projected to become a thing by about 2025, they can also program your wallet so that you are not able to spend on certain things that are disallowed. We're inside of a minute to go, Doug, so sadly we're going to have to leave it here, but you can find out more in Doug's new book, which is Corrupting the Image 3, Singularity, Superhumans, and the Second Coming of Jesus. Doug, again, where do people find out more, and where do they follow your work?
Right, so you can go to douglashamp.com. I have all the chapters there, so if you want to read it one web page at a time, you can do it there. You can also go to my store, douglashamp.com/store. And so on Amazon.com, you can get the physical book there, or if you want to get the Audible version, you can do that. So either way, it's available, and I hope people enjoy it.
Doug, always a fascinating conversation. Thank you for sharing time with us today. And thank you for watching. This is Unraveling Revelation.
Unraveling Revelation is a viewer-supported outreach of Gilbert House Ministries. Follow us online at unravelingrevelation.tv and gilberthouse.org. That's where you'll find our weekly Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship. Join us as we study the Bible every week, verse by verse, in chronological order. We'd love to hear from you. Contact us through our websites or drop us a line at P.O. Box 78, Crane, Missouri 65633.